Hi friends, it's Nicole and today I want to bring you my April TBR. It's not only crazy to think about that a quarter of the year has already passed, but also this video is the last video I'll be filming in this setting. You may notice that I said this TBR has a twist. That is because usually the first part of my TBR is the books that I'm gonna read for From and About Asia reading project. But since the season 2 of the project is coming in May, I want to take a break of reading books for From and About Asia and instead, I revisited my TBRs for January and February and re-invited some of the books that I haven't read to this TBR. In the future, I want to do this revisit to my TBR periodically because I don't usually get to finish all the books that I planned for reading, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I forgot about those books and I still want to read them. However, I'll leave the books that was on my TBR before that I didn't finish to the last of this video, and firstly, talking about some books that I haven't featured in any of my TBRs. Firstly, I have two books I want to read that are also on the long list of this year's Women's Prize for Fiction. If you didn't know, I did try a chapter tag of all the books I can borrow from the library on the long list of Women's Prize for Fiction. I'll leave the video down below if you haven't checked it out, but I picked 4 books from the try a chapter tag that I really want to get into and read more, and this month I thought I would just have 2 of them as my priorities. The first one is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. This is a book that I was very interested in before I even read the first chapter. The first chapter of this book was talking about a girl whose father was fascinated by trees and her life was also influenced by plants a lot, but she didn't know that yet. But the most important thing that makes me want to read this book ASAP is because the first chapter ended with a cliffhanger. I was just so curious about what happening next, so this one is my top priority on the long list. The second book on the long list I want to continue reading is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith. This is a novel that with heavy mystery elements in it. It's talking about 2 young women disappeared in Saigon in Vietnam at different times. One is like decades ago and one is like current time. And the first chapter is talking about the girl who disappeared recently, and I'm very curious to see the tie of 2 girls' life and also why they disappeared. And also apparently one of the protagonists left some trace behind her and her relatives and friends are just seeking clues from those traces. So this one is another one that I'm very curious about. And I think in April I will continue reading for the Booktube Prize for the nonfiction section. So personally reading some fictional books is a well balanced, I think. And speaking of fictional story, one of my favorite writers in China, Zhen, is coming up with her first novel. Before this novel, she was just writing some nonfiction that I really love, and this novel is her first full-length novel that I'm so excited about. The novel is called Ban Ma. It's talking about a woman who is struggling with conceive, and also she's facing some disagreement with her husband, and she ended up went to Thailand and seeking for some top technologies to help her to conceive, and also things started to happen. Normally I'm not a big fan reading about motherhood and the struggles for conceive, but Zhen, as my favorite writer, and also in one of her recent essays, she mentioned that part of the story was based on her own experiences wanting to have a daughter and her thoughts and reflections on motherhood and on life. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. Then I have a book that's been on my bookshelf for a very long time, and it is The History of Love by Nicole Krauss. This is a book talking about a teenage girl who's seeking for the solutions for her mom's loneliness, and she thought she found the answer in one of the books that her mom loves translating. And then the story takes us to New York, where an author was living in the memories of a piece of relationship he had 60 years ago. So I think there's some apparent tie with the 2 stories. And I picked up this book because, first of all, I've had it for a very long time. I noticed that I'm always getting new books and got excited for the new books, and a lot of books that I have for a long time just kind of get ignored. So I want to somehow fix that because I have so many unread books behind me. And the second reason is I still remember the hype it has back in the days, so I still have some hopes for the story. And the third reason is it's quite short, and I think it won't take me a lot of time to read it because in April I just moved into the new apartment and I have so much work to do. And speaking of new books I'm excited about, I have 2 new books I want to read next month. The first one is Ariel by Sylvia Plath. This is the most profound poetry collection that Sylvia Plath has written, and I have been curious about her poetry ever since I read Red Comet last year. I loved her biography so much, and in that book her poems are constantly being cited and referenced to make connections with her works and her life. And also there's another reason I pick up this poetry collection is because one of my favorite poet in China has recently translated a new version of this poetry collection into Chinese. The poet is called Bao Huiyi. She's also a professor in Fudan University. I already love Bao Huiyi's work so much, like the poems that she wrote. And she also does wonderful translations of a variety of things. So I'm very curious to see what her translation of Ariel will be like. So I'll be reading both the English version and the Chinese version at the same time. And then it's time to talk about the books that I re-invited to my TBR. In January, I actually did a very good job reading my TBRs. I have only one book that I didn't finish, and the book is This Green and Pleasant Land by Ayisha Malik. I know, this is the third time I'm featuring this book on my TBRs. The first time was actually last year, and then January, and then now. I do like the story so far. For some reason, every time I pick it up, I just have some very busy days, so I had to put this book down and then forgot to pick it up again. This is a book talking about a man who's a Muslim, but he's living in this kind of conservative Christian town. So before his mom died, her last wish is for him to build a mosque in his town. So he's still having hard time to processing it, and also he's having some troubles in his life, I think. So yeah, not only the story sounds very interesting, but also I know so many people that I trust, they all love this story. So I don't know, I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna read this in April, finish reading this in April. And then in February, I have more books that I haven't read, but I picked only 2 books because I already have so many books on my TBR. But the first one and the most important one is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. If you also watched my March TBR, this book is also on my March TBR. Although we have still some days to the end of March, but I just don't think I'll finish this because I will be busy packing and moving. So yeah, I'm gonna attempt it to read it again in April because I do want to read more classics, and also I have so many behind me still waiting for me, so I have to finish it in order to move on. I did start reading it, but I'm only at about page 50, but I do like the story so far, and I don't know what to say. It's still on my TBR. I'm gonna finish it in April. And the last book I re-invited to my TBR, and the last book of this TBR video, is White Rage by Kara Anderson. This is a book that I plan to read in the Black History Month in America, but I haven't got the chance to get to it. But I'm still very interested in reading it, and I think it's still a very important book, apparently. I heard so much good things about it. It's writing about a concept called White Rage that the author is writing as a fight back to the term of Black Rage that media always use in America. So yeah, I'm gonna try to read this again in April and report back of my thoughts. And that's all the books on my April TBR. Last month, after I post my March TBR, naming it Ambitious TBR, some of you guys told me that my TBRs are always ambitious, which I reflected, and I think that is true. But one can always have hopes, right? So I hope you enjoyed this video, and also please let me know what books are you planning to read in April, and do you have any thoughts about the books that I mentioned? And don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. Thumbs up to this video if you liked it. I wish you happy reading. Stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!